Hello, and welcome to the first episode of the Distance Junkie podcast. Yes, a brand new podcast. Well, not so new. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But the idea behind this podcast is to talk about all things in endurance sports. That could be ultra marathons, that could be trail running, that could be triathlons, cycling, whatever. I'm going to try to bring in a lot of different knowledge from hopefully some guests in the future, but I'm also going to cover a lot of the topics I talk about on the main channel, like fitness tech, GPS watches, whatever is going on in the scene on a weekly basis. We're going to try to keep up to date with that, and I will be doing, I'm going to try to do weekly episodes that I will call the Weekly Sync, which is kind of what this episode is today. Today's episode of the Weekly Sync, we're going to talk about this new podcast. We're going to talk about my current race calendar and what's coming up for me. We're going to talk about how OnlyFans is entering the ultra running space. Yes, OnlyFans. If you know, you know. We're going to talk about Polar's new integration. That's pretty exciting and long awaited. And we're going to talk about the new Garmin Distance G2 that it appears some of you care about, even though I don't really care about, which is why you didn't see a video on the channel. And we will talk about the Caliber biometric sensor that I've been testing over the past week or so, and some of the quirks that it has so far. And then at the end of this episode, we will be taking some Q&A. I put a little post out on Instagram, and I asked for questions from you in the audience that I'll be answering in this podcast today. And that's how we'll wrap it up. Okay? So I hope you're here for all that. And now let's talk about this new podcast. So if you're unaware, I've actually been doing this very podcast for like 2 years. The podcast started out in my in-laws, my wife's parents' basement. We were living there temporarily while we built this house where my office is now. And during that time, I had some free time on my hands, so I would hit record with just a microphone, no camera, and I would make a podcast and I would put it out on, Spotify and Apple. And after a while, people started listening. So I thought it was a good idea to turn on the camera and make a video portion of this as well. Now, even though I think that was a good idea, I think there's a good value in having video to a podcast and putting it on YouTube. It's a lot more searchable and all those things. But my mistake at that time was I made a whole separate channel for this podcast. It was the Chase to Summit Trail Talk podcast. That was a separate channel, and I would advertise it on the main channel, but it got very confusing because I had Chase to Summit in the title and the main channel's Chase to Summit. So I think it got a little bit confusing on what was what. And from people I talked to that watched the channel, a lot of people said, "Oh, you have a podcast? I didn't know that." And I think it just got very confusing. So from now on, this podcast is going to live on the Chase to Summit channel. And all you have to do to find it is go to the Chase to Summit channel and click on the podcast tab, and you'll find Distance Junkie. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you're an audio listener, that will automatically update. I basically changed the feed, so everything should update. You're just going to see Distance Junkie instead of Chase to Summit. Hopefully that makes sense. And if you haven't followed that yet over on Spotify or Apple, make sure to do that too. Search for Distance Junkie or even Chase to Summit. Hopefully it pops up. Hit that subscribe button. And let's keep trucking. Okay, with that long-winded intro out of the way, I just want to be as clear as possible with that. Let's get into some of the topics today. But before we do that, I want to give a shout out to the Patreon members that have been supporting the podcast and the main channel for such a long time. And on top of that, I do want to also mention the merch store. There is a discount code for the merch store for podcast listeners. So if you've been eyeballing a hat or a sweet hoodie like I'm wearing now, it's actually hard to see the logo on my camera. You can check out chasetosummit.com and use the discount code LISTEN15. That's LISTEN15, and that'll give you 15% off your order. Only for you, the podcast listeners. I just want to get into some of my training. For those of you who have been following the podcast, in the previous episode, I talked about my race calendar, and I'm currently signed up to run the Vermont 100-mile endurance race one more time. I don't know why I do this to myself. The last time I ran it, I pretty much fell apart. I have a video on the channel about that if you want to see me post-puke. Yes, I puked during that race. I had to puke and rally quite a bit because I had to sit down for like an hour. I felt pretty sick, but I got it done last time. But I still feel like I haven't run the race I want to run there. So I am signed up once again. And what that means for me is it's time to start ramping up those miles, start getting strategic about my workouts and what I'm doing for the upcoming race season. Because, the winter's been long and it's been tough. 4 kids, snow, ice. If you live in a cold climate, things get pretty difficult as an endurance athlete during the colder months. But I'm feeling good now. I'm starting to get things turning. Last Sunday, I did a 12-mile run on some pretty technical trails locally, and it went well. Like, I felt pretty good near the end, even though my pace wasn't where I want it to be. It was still a good, systems check as to see what's going on. And if you watch the channel, a couple of weeks ago, I also did a VO2 max and fitness test, and those numbers came back pretty encouraging. If you haven't watched that video, go check it out. But basically, I did like a running gait analysis, a force plates test, a VO2 max test, lactate threshold, all the things. I did that with my wife. She did all the tests too. And I do have some follow-up content coming all about those tests where I compare the results I got from the lab test to the results I got from my Garmin and Apple Watches and Coroses and VO, all the other things. So I guess time will tell. I'm starting to get the wheels turning on coming up with a good training calendar leading up to the Vermont 100. And I still want to get a couple of more races on the calendar, like a 50K, couple of 50Ks, a 50 miler, because I kind of use racing as training in a weird way. I like to put big runs in the form of races on the calendar in strategic locations leading up to big events like a 100-mile race. So I can use those to sort of prep myself for how to get in and out of aid stations quickly and fueling and all the things you need to do for an ultra marathon. So I'm going to be putting some shorter distances on the calendar to get ready for that. If you've got a good 50K, 50 miler in the New England area that you think I should run, comment down below. Now that we've gone through my personal saga of training, let's dive into some of the news this week. First of all, I want to talk about the new addition to Whoop. The Whoop platform got VO2 max, and that's been a long-awaited thing for a while now. The weird thing, though, if you look at my wrist, I actually have a Whoop on right now. The Whoop Band, if you don't know, it's a very simple device. It's kind of like a watch without a screen that pairs to an app on your phone, and that app does all the heavy lifting. Whereas if you look at something like a Garmin or Apple or Coros, Polar, Suunto, a lot of those have like on-device processing where they don't leverage the cloud as much. The Whoop platform pretty much entirely relies on the app in the cloud to do all of their processing. Whoop now has estimated VO2 max. And if you are already a Whoop user, this is going to populate automatically if you've been wearing it for an extended period of time. Unfortunately, I wasn't wearing mine, so my VO2 max estimation in the app is currently blank until I have 2 weeks under my belt of sleeping with it. After 2 weeks, you unlock that VO2 max score, and hopefully I can come back to it and tell you how accurate it is in my experience so far. But for now, I'm still playing the waiting game. Now that we've talked about the new addition with VO2 max in Whoop, that's a good segue into a new device I've been testing, actually sitting over there. I should go get it, but I don't want to get up. It's the Caliber biometric sensor. So I've been seeing a lot of this thing on the internet and in podcast form. I think even like Andrew Huberman and Peter Attia mentioned this briefly in their podcast, where the Caliber biometric sensor is an at-home device where you can test things like your resting metabolic rate. You can test your carb versus fat burning scenario, like what percentages you're burning during rest. And you can actually get a performance test for cycling or running, all of the things that will spit out your peak VO, ventilatory plateau, whatever you want to call it. And with that information, you can actually derive a approximate VO2 max from your running or cycling. So I actually bought one. It's like $500, not a cheap thing, but I thought it was interesting. So I bought one and I got it about a week ago and I've been testing it ever since. My experience so far has been a little bit quirky and I'm starting to think I have a defective unit. I've been talking with Caliber about this. Hopefully they can resolve it. Judging by, their white papers and people that talk about it, it can be pretty accurate. So either I'm using it incorrectly or my unit is just not working properly. In either case, stay tuned to the main channel where I will have an update on this in the near future, and I'll probably incorporate it into the roundup of VO2 max and how it compares to my watches in that video as well. So stay tuned for that. Next topic in the news this week is Polar. The Polar watches got a pretty big update out there. So if you have a Polar Grid X Pro or Vantage V3 or even an older watch like a Grid X Original, any Polar Flow enabled device has received an update to incorporate Training Peaks workouts on your watch. So you can actually design a course on Training Peaks and import it into your watch to execute. If you don't know what Training Peaks is, it's a pretty big platform where athletes can go on and you can sort of design a workout calendar. And the cool thing about Training Peaks is that you can also invite your coach to the platform and they can design workouts for you, as well as import your workouts that you've done to see how you match up with the workout that was prescribed to you. It's a really awesome platform. A lot of people use it. A lot of pro athletes use it. And now you can do all of this on your Polar device as well, where previously this was entirely missing and it was a highly requested feature. I do want to add a quick note. If you have a Polar watch and you've been trying this feature out, definitely let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you and how it's working so far. Okay, next up in the news this week is a new Garmin device that sort of sneaked out under the radar, at least for most of us that aren't divers. So if you are a diver, you probably know what the Garmin Descent series is. It's essentially when Garmin takes one of their existing watches, typically a Phoenix model, and then they repurpose it to be a diving watch, specifically designed for apnea diving or scuba diving or free diving. And these Descent models often have a more of a depth rating, so they go deeper in the water and they give you more information than a standard Garmin watch. So now they've introduced the new Garmin Descent G2, which is it's a very different watch than most of the Descent series. This is sort of their budget option for a Descent watch. Looking at the specs here, we've got multiple dive modes. You can track, you've got multi-gas, nitrix, Trim-X, closed circuit rebreather, CCR, and gauge. Hopefully you know what all that means. And you do get an in-dive compass to allow you to navigate underwater, along with big numbers mode that will increase the size of the numbers on the screen so you can see it at a glance if you are underwater. Free dive features include dynamic apnea mode, apnea alerts, and a variometer. It comes in at $699 here in the USA. And of course, they are adding a premium for all the extra features. With all the tech news out of the way, I do have one more news tidbit for you in this week's episode. And it's that OnlyFans, which is, kind of an adult website. It didn't start as an adult website. OnlyFans was originally like a Patreon kind of thing, but then it went the other direction, and now it's pretty much an adult website. Has sponsored their first athlete in the trail and ultra running space, and that is Sabrina Stanley. Sabrina Stanley, I think about a week ago, advertised on her Instagram page. She announced that she is now sponsored by OnlyFans and the first athlete in the sports to be sponsored by them. I'm not sure what her OnlyFans content has on it. I have not subscribed to it. Hopefully it's just like training information and things like that, but one could imagine I don't know. Maybe you should subscribe and let me know in the comments down below. In either case, I found this pretty interesting that OnlyFans has entered the chat when it comes to ultra marathon running. I didn't think this day would happen, and I guess it means that ultra running is a real sport now, having a sponsor like that. If you don't know who Sabrina Stanley is, though, super accomplished athlete. She is a champion at the Hard Rock 100, which is arguably one of the hardest races in North America, out in Colorado. And if you look at her stats on anywhere, she's done some really amazing things. So taking nothing away from her, I just thought this was kind of interesting and worth sharing with you. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about OnlyFans in the ultramarathon sport. And with that, we have sort of wrapped up the news this week. Now let's do a little bit of listener Q&A. Now, if you don't know how this works, if you're a new listener to the podcast, I try to do a Q&A session every now and then on the podcast where I source my questions from you, the audience. And how I do this is I go out on Instagram and I put out one of those stories with a little question box where you can type in your question, and then I read it on the air here and I react to it in real time. And to be honest, I don't really pre-read these. So you're going to get my initial thoughts and try to get my most accurate representation of the answer to your question. Now, if you do want to be part of this segment in future episodes, make sure to follow me over on Instagram at Chase the Summit, where I will include your question, and it's a lot of fun. With that, let's dive into the first one. So this is from Baines989. If you had to wear only one watch as of today with the technology we have, which would it be moving forward and why? That is a great question. One watch is tough because if you know me, I like watches and I've got a lot of them. I'm very spoiled with watches. To pick one is difficult because I like them for different reasons. For example, I really like the Garmin Instinct 3 Solar because of the display and the simplicity of it. It's just a really nice, like everyday wear kind of watch. And I really enjoyed my time with that. I also really like Apple Watches. I like the Ultra 2, the Series 10. They're awesome in their own way. Admittedly, their battery life kind of drives me crazy, but it's cool to be able to make phone calls right from your watch and stream music, things like that. But I gotta say, if I could only pick one right now, my very spoiled and entitled answer to this question would probably be the Tactics 8, the Garmin Tactics 8 I'm wearing here. Now, if you know what the Tactics 8 is, I did a video about this a couple weeks ago. You know, I'm never going to use all the features of this watch. It's got like applied ballistics for shooting a rifle. It's got aviation things for flying a plane. The reason why I choose it is because it does everything. Like, if you want a watch from Garmin that has everything under the hood, every possible feature that they offer, the Tactics 8 really has it all. So I like the idea that if one day I'm like, hey, I should get into flying planes or something, I'd have a watch capable of doing that. It's also really cool looking. It's probably one of their sexiest watches on the market. It's got a big AMOLED display, and it is pretty much a Garmin Fenix 8 51mm form factor, so you get that crazy long battery life, which I do appreciate. So that's how I'll answer that question. Again, really hard question, and just because I said that, like, don't run out and buy the watches I mentioned, because like I've said in many videos, it really boils down to your personal use case and what you're going to do with it, not my use case. So take that with a grain of salt. Moving on. Next question. Strong Bacon. Cool name. What kind of lifting do you do? I was running and I've stopped, and I primarily do CrossFit now. So when it comes to lifting, I get this comment a lot. So genetically, I was blessed with I don't know, the appearance of having muscly arms in some way. I don't know where that comes from because, to be honest, I don't do a lot of lifting in my everyday life. I do a lot of like body weight exercises. So like before I run on the treadmill or something, I'll do a couple of sets of push-ups. I'll do some sit-ups, things like that. But I really don't do enough of strength training specific workouts. And that's something I actually learned when I went to Human Powered Health and did my VO2 max testing, running gait stuff. They actually did a test there called force plates, where I had to jump on these plates on the ground and to let them know my muscle imbalances. And I had a lot of muscle imbalances. So now they're telling me I should do like plyometric workouts and box jumps and things like that to strengthen all the areas where that would help improve my running and hiking form for my racing. So it's something I'm taking very seriously now. Next question from Parker Kurth. He gave me multiple questions, so I'll read a few of them here. Do you think David Roche can beat Kilian Jornet if they race together at the Western States 100? Okay, a little context here. If you're not an ultra marathon sport enthusiast, the Western States 100 is coming up in June. And it's pretty much the Super Bowl of ultra running here in the USA, where all the top athletes get together and run a really amazing race. The community out there is crazy. It takes place in California. It's a really difficult, beautiful, awesome community race. With that being said, this year is sort of special because David Roche is running, and he's put it out there to the world that he is gunning to basically win the race and hopefully do some sort of course record. Although the course record that stands right now is super aggressive because it was set by the GOAT himself, Jim Walmsley. If you don't know who Jim Walmsley is, Google him and you'll be blown away. And if you don't know who Kilian Jornet is, he is also the GOAT of ultra running. He is a UTMB athlete. He's done a lot of amazing things. I'm sure you know who he is, but there is a possibility of them racing together this year at the Western States 100. And if that happens, it's going to be mind-blowing. It's going to be crazy, and I can't wait to watch it. Now, as to how that unfolds, I don't know. I can't even put my head around it because there's such a competitive field there that anything could happen. There could be another athlete that shows up at the starting line, just like a couple of years ago with Adam Peterman, who won the race. He was sort of the underdog and won the entire race at a really impressive time. I was fortunate to be there that year to spectate and watch him and see that happen. So who knows what could happen? It could be someone that we don't expect who wins, who's been training their butt off and just hasn't been, in the limelight. Next question from Parker, same person. What is your pre-run go-to snack or meal and your post-run snack or meal? To be honest, I'm not super picky about this, probably because my schedule is so crazy. I tend to get my runs in when I can. Like if there's a lull in our day, I'll get my run in. And sometimes I don't even eat beforehand. I'll just like bring a gel with me and get some carbs in. That really only works for reasonable distances. If I'm running an ultra, like a 50K or longer, I'll focus on meals a little bit more. Admittedly, my strategy is probably not for everyone. Before a big race, like a 100-miler, my go-to is like a pizza. Yeah, sue me. So I'll get like a buffalo chicken pizza loaded and just go to town on that like the night before. And hopefully if it's an early morning race, that'll be like a nice boost in the morning. But that's my move and that's my strategy. Admittedly, I'm not an elite athlete, so maybe that's not the right move. Next question from Parker. He's got a few questions. Should Garmin come out with a treadmill? That's an interesting question. And I think if you asked me that a year ago, I'd be like, no. But now with the Wahoo Kicker Run treadmill that Wahoo put out, I do think there's some potential in the market to disrupt things. I've talked about treadmills a lot on the podcast and on videos, and I've always said treadmills are stuck in the past. Like all the big treadmill manufacturers, from Nordic Track to Lifestyle to whoever, even Woodway or super high quality treadmills. Yes, the running experience is great, but like the features you get are just kind of meh. I feel like the people who have pushed it the furthest have been companies like Wahoo and even Peloton doing some new things in the space. So with that being said, I do think there is potential for Garmin. They do make bike trainers. They do make stationary bikes. With that sort of background in engineering and in know-how, they could conceivably come up with a really interesting treadmill. And because it would be a Garmin product, they could tie it into Garmin Connect, make the ability to maybe sync your watch to it in weird ways, like transferring power data or advanced running metrics like ground contact time and balance, and get super accurate results because it's coming from sensors on the treadmill instead of your watch. You could also calibrate your distance automatically with the treadmill because it would know the speed you're running. So you could get accurate distance and pace data on your watch synced to the treadmill. Some interesting ideas there. Maybe import GPX files so you could like have automatic incline, decline, and speed. Yes. My answer is yes. They should come out with a treadmill, but I'm afraid if they did, it would be like $7,000 or something, and it would be out of my price range. Final question from Parker. What technology do you want to see in watches in 2025? Interesting question. As someone who's been doing this for a living for a couple of years now, I've tested a lot of watches. And I feel like we've hit that point of like diminishing returns. Maybe 3-4 years ago, a new watch would have like an entirely new technology. Crazy long battery life, better GPS accuracy, more advanced heart rate sensor, built-in flashlight, like big leaps that we've never seen before. But now here, 2025, things are different. Not a lot more can be done. GPS accuracy is already really good in almost every watch. Heart rate sensing accuracy has gotten so much better in almost every watch. Brands like Amazfit have even gotten to the point where their accuracy is actually pretty good. With the new T-Rex 3 and the Active 2, pretty good. So what could these brands do better? I guess what I'd like to see is an advance in battery technology, because as we move towards AMOLED devices, everything's AMOLED now, we've sort of taken a step back when it comes to battery life. Yes, some AMOLED watches like this Tactics 8 or the Amazfit products get really good battery life, but not all of them. In terms of like GPS on battery life, you have to deal with the fact that your display is going to turn off if you want longer extended battery life. So if you're an ultra runner and you want to run 100 miles, you're probably going to have to turn off the always on display. I'd love to see battery technology get to a place where we can do that 100-mile race with mapping and navigation with an always on display without needing a charge. Talking about other technologies getting into watches, I'd love to see a way to measure blood glucose in a watch without an invasive process. So right now, if you want to get an accurate read on blood glucose levels, you have to wear one of the sensors on your arm that actually has a little needle that pokes a fiber into your arm, and that's how you get that information. But back in January, when I went to CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, I observed a lot of companies picking up blood glucose levels with IR light, using optical technology instead of a needle poking into your arm. In looking at that technology, I could see that sometime in the near future, they'll be able to shrink that down into the size that could be incorporated in a watch, so we get one more metric to look at. That would be pretty cool too, but time will tell. Who knows? Jay Pascar, I can't say it. Jay Paliscar? How is your dog doing? This is funny. So a couple of weeks ago on Instagram, I posted a story about my dog, Conan. Conan, unfortunately, one morning I woke up at like 5 a.m. He was on the floor on his side with his arms kind of convulsing, or paws convulsing, and his eyes were freaking out. It was really weird. They were vibrating from left to right. So I rushed him to the emergency vet. He stayed there all day. I was there all day. I was there for like 9 or 10 hours. And they came to the conclusion that he had vestibular disease. So what that is apparently some sort of issue with the balancing system in dogs and cats that allows them to stabilize themselves, and often exhibits symptoms with vibration of the eyes and stumbling around. All things I observed with Conan. So he was there all day. He got fluids, he got medication, and they were scared that he actually had a blood clot in his brain or some sort of brain tumor, or he had a stroke. So they wanted to do an MRI. And unfortunately, I had to decline it because it was like $10,000 to get an MRI on my dog. We do have pet insurance. They didn't cover all of it. It got to be very expensive. So we thought we'd bring him home. We'd get him as comfortable as he could get. We'd feed him some good food, and we put him on a medication for blood pressure, which he apparently had really had blood pressure. I'm happy to report now 2 weeks later, this dog is like 100% back to life. He's trotting around the yard. He's playing. He's jumping on and off the couch. He's totally fine. I mean, I don't know, medically if he's totally fine, but he's appearing to be much happier than he was. I'll keep you posted, though, in the next episode. Next question. The world is a console, is the user. Would you trust an Apple Watch Series 10 for a marathon? Yes. So I get this question a lot, and a lot of people feel like once they get into that marathon distance, or they have an eye on the Boston Marathon or New York Marathon, that they need to run out and buy a Garmin or a Coros or something like that. You don't really have to. So most people in decent shape will run, a 4 to 6 hour marathon. Even if it's a little bit longer, you're probably going to be fine with an Apple Watch. Apple Watches, if you have the settings turned right, if you turn off the always on display, if you turn off Bluetooth and connectivity to your phone, and you're only using the heart rate and your GPS, you can get a lot more than you'd expect from an Apple Watch. You could probably get 7-8 hours on a single charge. So for most people, you're going to be just fine. Now, if you are walking in a marathon, it's going to be a little bit longer. No judgment on that at all. But that's when you might want to consider bringing along another device or recording with your phone in a pinch, or yes, going out and getting a Garmin or a Coros or something like that. But I think most people will be just fine with an Apple Watch in a marathon situation. Of course, that's going to depend on the Apple Watch you choose. A Series 10 should be just fine. Something like a 3 or 4 year old, Series whatever, 5, 4, that's had some battery degradation and multiple charges, then it might not cut the mustard at that point. You might have to use some trickery to get around that by turning on battery saver mode or something like that. hopefully that helps. And I do have some videos on the main channel about how to set up your battery life on your Apple Watch, how to conserve battery life, and how to run distances with an Apple Watch, including the Apple Watch Ultra 2, which I did run. I think I did a 50 miler with that and made a video about it. So go check that out. The settings still apply. Final question from Torbjorn HB, a Patreon member. Shout out to Torbjorn HB. Pronouncing that wrong, probably, sorry. He says, you're almost 2 years into YouTube full time. That's right. How's it going? Yeah, so I went full time on YouTube as my job back in February of 2022. So it's actually been longer than 2 years. 2023, sorry. February 2023. Full time, quit my day job, started doing this for a living. And it's been over 2 years now, two years and change. And it's going well. Like, I'm still doing it. I'm still able to pay my bills and put food on the table for 4 kids and pay the mortgage. So far, so good. I will say, like, doing this for a living, I think anyone in this space can relate that once this is your job, the perspective of like money gets really weird, because I want to put out content that I'm proud of and I care about, and I always want to be a good source of information, and my credibility is everything. So I get a lot of offers in my inbox of like XYZ brand wanting to sponsor a video. It's easy to fall into that trap of taking opportunities that you don't want to do because you want to bring more revenue in, and I'm trying to avoid that and doing pretty well at that so far. So I'll say so far so good. Thumbs up for now. If you see me working at Starbucks or something, then things are not going so well. So I'll say that. All right, that's the end of the questions for this episode. I do want to thank all of you who sent in questions. Appreciate them. Hopefully my answers were entertaining. And for all of the viewers and listeners out there, thank you for tuning in to the new Distance Junkie podcast. I've got a lot planned for this podcast. Like I said, the weekly sync will be coming with news and tech and ultra running or endurance space. We're going to talk about all that stuff in the cadence episodes. And I am going to be trying to bring in some new guests and cameo appearances for you as well. So stay tuned for that. With that being said, if you've got a great idea for a guest to bring on the show, comment down below. Love to hear from you. And while you're down there, make sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the things, add me on Spotify, Apple, check out the merch store with that discount code, LISTEN15 for 15% off. Follow me on Instagram, Strava, do all the things, description down below. And of course, as always, I'll see you in the next one. Okay? Bye.